President Trump says the U.S. will, quote, beat the effing S out of Iran in new comments to Fox News this morning after Iran launched what U.S. Central Command called an attempted surprise attack on U.S. forces in the Middle East. And unless you've been missing for the last 5 months of news, you know that this is not the first time the commander-in-chief has issued such violent and chaotic claims. In this about 6 months now, we're reaching that mark in this long war that's been dragging on without an end in sight. And we are seeing signs that the war may, in fact, be widening. Saudi Arabia conducted joint strikes with the United States on an Iranian-backed militia in Iraq, killing at least 20 fighters. Let's bring in Arash Azizi, contributing writer at The Atlantic and the author of What Iranians Want. Arash, there'd been a pause in fighting, so what's your read on why Iran would do this now?
I think they were worried that they were kind of paranoid and worried that even though there was a pause, that they were going to be attacked. So, and especially after Prime Minister Netanyahu's visit here, you know, they thought that there might be some coordination there. So they wanted to get ahead of it and control the pace, basically.
So they're sending a signal. I mean, I'd seen some musing that what would happen in the days after this White House meeting between Netanyahu and Trump would be that there would be some kind of move back into all-out war. Mm-hmm. Do you think that those concerns, those fears that were shared, I mean, across kind of both sides of the aisle, but Marjorie Taylor Greene was one of them, raising them publicly. She was saying on Twitter that she thought we'd be back at war by Friday. Do you think that there was some element of truth there, that there may be activity that they are genuinely responding to?
Well, there's always a chance that Iran might have got attacked, right? So no one knew what they will actually do. But I know that speaking to people in Iran, this is a thinking of the establishment in Iran. That's why they decided to launch the attacks. And there's also kind of a pessimistic mood as to the possibility of talks. They were, the talks are going on the Strait of Hormuz. Iranians see it as a return to the MOU and implementation of Article 5 the way they want it. But they just didn't see it happening. But what I think they don't want is an escalation. They don't want a further escalation. They don't want a broader war. And they still think that they can get a deal that somehow opens the strait, ends the blockade that the U.S. has put on Iran, and is able to go back to the MOU.
At this stage, who do you understand the United States to actually be in talks with? Because at points, you've heard figures like Vice President Vance describe it as though he has very rational partners to be working with. And then there's this outrage at the IRGC and their activity in the strait. And so is there a disconnect between who the United States is talking to and thinking they are making progress with and who actually runs things in Iran?
No, there's no really disconnect. Like the National Security Council is dominated by Ghalibaf, a Speaker of the Parliament, who's an old IRGC hand. He's as IRGC as they come. And they control the leadership of IRGC. Now, there are political differences in Iran, just like there are here, and there's like there are pressures sometimes from these fringe ultra hardliners who just want to fight all the time. But this idea that the IRGC sort of acts rugely on its own and stuff, it looks like the administration here uses it kind of self-servingly. They'll be like, oh, it's not our fault. We dealt with the right guys, but they have their crisis. But no evidence, there's no evidence for that. And I think there's a lot of evidence that no, actually, they're all in sync. And I spoke last night, just as the attacks happened to people close to the establishment. They very much defended the attacks. They gloated even about it. There was not a sense that, oh, we don't know who is doing this. So I think that's basic. There's no daylight between the IRGC and the leadership of the National Security Council.
What do you make of Saudi Arabia and them now saying that they, for the first time, that they are part of these joint strikes? Does that signal something to you about how things are shifting in the region?
Absolutely. I think we are entering a new phase. We also saw it with Kuwait and Bahrain, and actually UAE, some openly and some and not so openly, taking actions. I think these countries are saying, look, we also have militaries. Yes, we have the backing of the United States, but we also have militaries. So if you fight us, you're going to fight us, not just the United States. So if Iraq wants to, if there's Iraqi militias that are linked to the Iraqi government, if they want to fight Saudi Arabia, they're going to face the Saudis themselves, and they can't just sort of make this as, oh, this is not about you, it's about Iran and America. And I think it's a very fascinating development that Saudis directly, openly took part in the attacks and defended their country.
Do you think there is going to be anything to come on this proposed nuclear deal with the Saudis as well? Because it hinges, at least in Trump's mind, on the Abraham Accords. But the Saudis have been very clear that that's not something that is going to work. Them developing a closer relationship with Israel is not possible unless there is a path to Palestinian statehood. And so it all just seems almost like a moot point.
Look, in the Middle East, you can't be sure about a lot of things, but there's one thing I can say with some degree of being sure. Saudi Arabia is not going to give up on its long links to Palestine and the path to the Palestinian statehood, for it's not clear what, not for a civil nuclear program, not to make the president happy, right? The Saudis are serious about that. If the Israelis want to be normalized with Saudi Arabia, they must end the occupation and give a path to the people of Palestine. This is a position that Saudis have had since 1981, by the way. Since 1981, they've told to the Israelis, you can live in security in this region only if you allow a path for the formation of the Palestinian state. And unfortunately, Israel has basically said no since 1981. And in Arab Peace Initiative of 2002, Saudis repeated the same offer. So that's basically where we are there.
So moot point. Arash Azizi, always good to talk to you. Thank you so much for your expertise.